My next guest is Jennifer Ozgur. Jennifer is an organizational development and change management consultant, professional development designer and facilitator, appreciative inquiry practitioner, and certified trauma informed and brain based coach. Jennifer has combined her years of classroom experience with evidence based practices to create informational and transformational experiences that uplift and inspire any workplace culture. From crafting a collective vision, creating our core values and strengths, to co-creating dynamic, inclusive plan everyone can embrace, Jennifer works with teams to be energized around a shared purpose that achieves sustainable results. In 2000, after completing her BSED, Jennifer began her career as a middle and high school English teacher in a Pennsylvania public school system. While in the classroom, she built positive relationships with her students so that they might be challenged and feel supported. In recent years, she has expanded her reach to working with teams in districts and at the building level. And she is also in process of writing a book. She works with larger organizations such as the Southern Oregon Education Service Center Service District and the Arizona Bureau of Indian Education. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Dana. It's great to be here, and I'm really honored and excited to be talking about some things that I'm really passionate about in education.
Well, we'll start off with a question I ask everyone. Tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
Thank you. I mean, that is such a great question. I think most of us who were in the classroom at the time of the pandemic got really thrown in trenches. There were always some areas that I think educators would like to see more of, and it became abundantly clear when we all had a shutdown and we were all Zooming and being put in little Brady Bunch boxes. And I think the trench for me and how it showed up, and for a lot of other people, is communication and transparent communication, and ways that authentic trust building communication can really elevate cultures. I think a lot of people were really struggling emotionally through the pandemic. We really are social beings and we crave relationships. And I think that became even more clear throughout the pandemic. And so the way I was able to crawl out of that trench is through using these tools of appreciative inquiry, which is something that I know we're going to get into in our conversations together. But I really think that is the big trench everyone had. And I think some people are still recovering from that, students, professionals, educators, and the community at large. And again, I'm really optimistic that when people discover appreciative inquiry, that will continue to lift people out of the trench.
So you told me in the pre-chat that you started using appreciative inquiry a few years before the pandemic, and you'd been in education already for quite some time. How did you, let's say, stumble across working with appreciative inquiry, or was it something that you were being trained on as part of your role?
Oh, it was definitely a stumble for sure. What happened was I had written a little children's book. Literally just happened to have it here because I was talking to another educational professional, and I wanted to show it to them. It's not a plug for my book or anything, but just, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It's about giving your child a million kisses and the neuroscience. And when my daughter was born, I was kissing her all the time. I wrote this little poem about how you can give your child a million kisses. And then I started to wonder, why is it we'd love to kiss our babies so much? And one thing went to another, and learning about oxytocin and, the love hormones. And that went to brain-based education. And I got my training out of Baltimore. That was a time when I had taken a sabbatical, when this cute little poem that I wrote got turned into a children's book, and was really doing a deep dive in the way students learn. And, it was funny to me when I heard about brain-based education. I'm like, well, what else is there? I mean, that's where we learn, is in the brain, but really the neuroscience about how we learn. So that led me, since I was in Baltimore, to learn about poverty in the brain, trauma in the brain, and a lot of deficit-based thinking. One thing led to another, because when you have more poverty, chances are you have a higher marginalized groups, and that brought me to learning about equitable practices. And then one thing led to another. And I was involved in these groups that were really focused on having abundance mindset, having a growth mindset, having resilience, and despite challenges, what's going on that certain people can still come through on the other side successfully. That's when I met all these people who were learning about having their best lives, um, got involved in an entrepreneurial group, and they very generously gifted me training out of Cleveland,
Okay.
involving, yeah, it was Cleveland, it was Case Western Reserve University. And so I learned it right there at source, because if
Okay.
you research appreciative inquiry, it sometimes might get distilled or misapplied in some way. So I learned it from source. I got a chance to meet Dr. David Cooper Ryder, who was the founder of appreciative inquiry in the 1980s. And everything I learned about appreciative inquiry, which is about more like Fortune 500, big business, huge organizations like NASA, Google, Facebook, the United Nations, they all use appreciative inquiry when they bring together different roles within their organization to make decisions. And I thought, isn't that what education really, really needs? And I started taking it, applying it in my classroom, applying it in some of the professional development that I was doing as facilitation techniques, as ways to scaffold a lesson plan. And again, people started to ask me to present at conferences, national conferences, statewide conferences. And that's how I started getting involved in Oregon and Arizona. And that is my mission now, is to take this organizational and change management systems process and apply it to K-12. So I hope that wasn't too long, but that was the journey that got me to where I am today.
So yeah, it's a lot that I've heard of in some of my doctoral studies, and I think we've touched on it a bit in different PDs at the building level. But as you said, a lot of school districts don't use it, and really in terms of helping in your classroom, let's look at that like micro level. How did you use it just within your English classroom?
Great question. So, how I use it in the classroom is, there's always a lot of words in education that administrators are looking for. One of them right now is student engagement, student autonomy, or student agency. Some people call it student voice. I try to shy away from that term. Not everyone has a voice, be it through autism or speech impairments, right? So, through autonomy and agency and engagement techniques, one thing in appreciative inquiry is doing appreciative interviews. And what I did was I took the way they do appreciative interviews, where you ask each other the best of what was, is, and will be. And I turned that into a conversation map and use the whole metaphor of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey,
Okay.
and using hiking metaphors, having a trail. When we're going on a journey, we leave a trail of conversations behind. And so I take this appreciative inquiry, appreciative interview, and turn it into a conversation map. And I use the acronym of CLIMB, and how do we climb together in our classroom. And basically, you can ask positively phrased conversation questions, little conversation tags. And when you ask a positive question, you're going to have a positive outcome. And the conversations are going to be energizing, they're going to be inspiring. And when you ask these student-centered questions around what you want to see more of in your classroom, be it through the content, be it through student-centered learning, it really opens up a whole range of possibilities that would not otherwise happen.
So you said you were doing some PD at the school level. So was this something that your school embraced and a lot of other teachers started using, or was there a little bit of pushback?
Well, it's something that I have been developing for a while. And just this year, I was asked to present on the student agency and autonomy piece, on how
Okay.
you can get students to be really involved in the classroom. And so that I was really grateful. I actually had presented at a national conference over the summer in Tennessee. And there were a lot of great educational professionals there. And in fact, I think one of your previous guests, Eric Francis, through Depth of Knowledge, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he was on. I was telling him that I'm on the podcast here, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's such a great podcast. You're so, lucky to be on it." And so, in working with other educational practitioners like him and other people who are really wanting to get students to take a really deeper dive and own their learning, that's how I was able to slowly bring this into the school. I mean, it's a very different approach. So I started myself and then it started to ripple out. So I don't know if that answers your question. But that's, it was slow to develop because I wanted to do
Sure.
it very mindfully. And it's kind of like popcorn. Once the first couple kernels pop, then it starts to flurry. So there's been a flurry of interest with it in my school, yes, and also nationally, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and it's nice to reference Eric Francis and Depth of Knowledge and how he has worked a lot with that piece in schools, and we're seeing a lot of schools look more for the student centers and questioning piece, right? But I think it really it needs to be something that schools are embracing as a whole. I think like you said, it worked within your classroom, but also like if we're going to use it, for example, at the high school level, see how it's working in different subjects as well, and not just kind of maybe you do a pilot program for a few months or up to a year, but really kind of embracing that, I think is the best way to go. I don't know if that is kind of with your experience, or does it work kind of at that smaller group level?
Well, that's one of the reasons why, like, he and I actually connected is because he does questioning, right? And the different types of questioning you can have in the classroom. And I had said, oh, well, what about appreciative inquiry, that type of questioning?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And to say, well, it's an organizational development, it's like more of a corporate thing. And I said, and that's my point exactly. You can use appreciative inquiry as a pedagogy, as a way to get students to come together. And it's like a fractal, it ripples out because schools are an organization and we're always navigating change. And so very rarely do you find a framework that can be a way to teach students and a way to elevate the entire system as a K-12 district, right? Or service district. So that's why I'm really love to geek out on appreciative inquiry and how it can revolutionize how we do schools if you embrace it properly.
Yeah, and I like that term. Like you said, there's a lot of things we kind of had our eyes open to during the pandemic, which was now 5 years ago. But also, like, there's things that you've been doing since before then. There's things that a lot of educators have been doing, but like really opening our eyes more and becoming more student centered and looking into deeper questionings, et cetera. But I wanted to talk a little bit about your book. So I mentioned in the bio that you're working on a book. Tell me a little bit about what it's about. You said you have a website for it, and maybe an idea of when it might come out.
So the book is called A Trail of Conversations. And so the website is atrailofconversations.com. I'm writing it with my business partner. I almost want to say life partner because she and I have been doing this. Like, we confer with each other all the time. We spend so much time together. But she lives in Oregon with her family. I'm here outside of Philadelphia. And we met through a mutual friend with the Appreciative Inquiry community. And she and I have been doing work in Oregon, Arizona, Montana, here in the tri-state area where I live. So every time we would apply appreciative inquiry into our professional developments, into our trainings, into our workshops, into our courses, we started to flesh out this framework. And again, the trail, meaning, you're going on an adventure, and Heidi Marlinghouse is her name. I don't know if I said that, but she lives in Oregon and she loves to go on hikes, and she sends me all these beautiful pictures. And so we were really thinking that is a great metaphor for what we're trying to do in education. So trail, again, just like climb, is an acronym, so is TRAIL. And what are these 5 core competencies that you need? And specifically, reaching administration, that's really our target audience, because when you have an administrator who embraces our frameworks, then they can disseminate it to all of the teachers, right? So that's what our book is really about, is creating these 5 core competencies in order to have collaborative leadership, in order to elevate school cultures, and ultimately elevate student achievement.
Doesn't want that, right? The student achievement is a thing that a lot of people are looking to raise, and how teachers can also get more engagement out of students. So that is, you can see on the website a little bit about the TRAIL framework. And do you have any idea about the publishing, or can people look for it at the sometime later in 2025?
So Heidi and I are looking, anyone who has published a book, there's definitely, that's the whole journey as well. And to be very mindful of finding the right fit. In the meantime, you really want to get the message out there. So if people go onto the website of atrailofconversations.com, you can download, basically it's about 30 pages of the background knowledge of why is this important, what are our aspirations for bringing in appreciative inquiry, and it gives you basically like a crib sheet or cliff notes, if you will,
Sure.
of the different frameworks. So they should be able to get enough so that it will start the process of them thinking about it, maybe even trying some things, have suggested questions that they could use in their schools. And then ultimately the hope is that they want to know more, they reach out to us, and really how might you trailify your building, your school district, ultimately to the point where you would have these summits where you bring together teachers, students, families, the community, and really have that robust engagement in order to have everyone support the students. And, right now, as always, and especially in a couple of weeks, education becomes political. And if we focus more on our similarities of what we all want, we'll find that there's a lot more things that we have in common. On the periphery might be different ways we might want to go about it. But when you bring all the people together and solicit their perspectives, the magic happens. I mean, we've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, so people can definitely visit that website. You also offer consulting. So first of all, you do offerings for schools. Talk to me a little bit about what you do for teachers or teacher teams, and maybe in terms of just that interview process. I think you said the climb interview process. So you have 2 different types of consulting, but let's start off with the one for the teacher teams or the individual teachers.
So if a building leader would want us to come into the schools and introduce the teachers to this, the climb model, first off, we have everything is customized because every school has different needs. And so we would ask, what about this excites you? What are you currently working on? And then we would tailor it for specifically their needs. So for example, maybe building leadership would like to see more collaboration. Well, guess what? Then we can introduce them to these types of questioning techniques, the trail competencies, climb through PLCs, because we have opportunities to get together and talk. And sometimes PLC stands for people love complaining, and we would like to elevate those conversations. Also, we could be talking about student leadership. That's another big thing. And how might you develop those qualities in your students, either in the classroom or in extracurriculars? How do you engage students so that their perspective is heard, validated, and acted upon? And when that happens, then you can really, we always talk about relationships, and it's more than just relationship like, oh, I know if and I teach seniors, so I'm going to use that as an example. I know who has a job. I know what sports they're in and what their aspirations are after college. That's nice, and that will develop better relationships. But I'm talking about the relationships where I am fostering in my students the qualities that will make them successful later in life. And those are the types of activities that we can do and that we can bring to teachers that will energize their classroom.
Yeah, that's definitely something I think a lot of teachers need help working on, especially when we have a lot of students who still have a great number of absences, or students with just trauma backgrounds and, are hesitant to share. There are those students that kind of slip through the cracks that I think that's a great option to work with in PLC. So you also said that you do some coaching on appreciative inquiry for district leaders or for buildings, and also for these what we call in Colorado BOCES, so these kind of collaborative school groups, like you said. These I think you mentioned they were like groups of schools that aren't districts, but they're kind of within a geographical area. I think some other states might call them BOCES as well. But you said you work for those groups. So what do you do with these larger, like the macro level?
So before I answer that question, I'd like to ask you, what does that stand for?
I'm not completely sure. I just know that we have several of them in Colorado. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
they're more some of them include different districts, but also they could be, some of them could be charter schools that are included, or
Mm-hmm.
some rural districts that might not really have partners, and they do have PD come into those for regional PD as well.
Okay, yeah. Here in Pennsylvania, they're called IUs, which are
Okay.
intermediate units.
Okay.
So all the school districts in a certain county, Montgomery County, Lehigh County, I'm in Chester County, and I think we have like 13 districts within our county. And so it's like the mothership
Okay.
of PD. So that's what it's called out here. In Oregon with Heidi, they're called education service districts. And to answer your question, I've, again, putting together packages on what people want. So it's whatever people have the capacity for, the budget for. I've done like one-on-one coaching bundles where I just coach them one-on-one and really take a deep dive in their specific needs. Heidi and I have also set up communities of practice, and it all depends upon what they're looking for. So for example, what we did is we worked with the service district. And again, to your point, a rural school, a small school versus an urban school, very different needs, yet we still need the same outcome.
Yeah.
So that's where the magic comes alive, is when you create a cohort and you get together once or twice a month, and we would alternate. And specifically, their affirmative topic was more inclusive schools. How can we bring in different groups, be it Black and Brown students, be it Indigenous populations, especially out on the West Coast? And we would ask questions about what they're currently working on. We would give them suggestions. They would implement that, and then they come back a couple weeks later and say, how did it go? What worked well? How can we continue to support you? So those are some of the ways we work with the specific leadership. And of course, strategic planning.
And you also work with districts and maybe school leaders on positive workplace culture. Talk to me about how appreciative inquiry can help with that.
Sure. And by the way, I did want to say about this in working with one-on-one schools. You were talking about student attendance as an example. Two different areas where we worked with leadership. One was one-on-one, and I spoke with, this was in Baltimore, and it was a community school framework with the 4 pillars for community schools, and they were working on attendance and a sense of belonging. And through asking a series of positively framed questions, we came up with an idea of creating an umbrella drive,
Okay.
and that increased attendance.
Huh.
Can you guess why?
Because students weren't coming when it was raining.
Yes, that is 100%. And it was actually in a more African American population, and they did not want to get their hair wet. And it was like a real thing. So they had an umbrella drive, and we were looking at well, when are they attending versus when they're not? And if you're just
Sure.
only looking at when they're not attending, it starts to get, again, deficit based, and you're not really getting inspired. But when you're looking at all the times that they were attending, and then they started to say, oh, well, I wonder what that could be. And before you know it, one thing led to another, and it was the umbrella drive. The other time was bringing together the parents and asking, when do you feel in a part of the community like you most belong? And they started to analyze that. So it could have been from their church, it could have been in their families. Why? What about that specific condition? Why do you feel like you belong there? And so taking those positive questions and say, okay, now how might we, that's the big thing in appreciative inquiry, how might we create those similar experiences in this area of your life over in your school district? So positive in that way. And I forget the question you asked.
About the positive workplace culture, how appreciative inquiry can
Yeah.
help with that.
Yeah, thank you. So kind of like that kind of does segue into it, is asking questions about when have you felt most appreciated here at XYZ school? What was going on? What, like so many people will say, oh, remember your why and discover your purpose. And I think a lot of teachers know why they wanted to go into education. But asking a question of when was the last time you really were living your purpose in the classroom? What was going on? When was there a time that you truly felt supported by your administration? What was going on? How might we put that in other areas? So it's really about mindfully crafting these questions, because every single word, and as an English teacher, I'm a big word nerd, the tone and the color and the nuance of every single word, when you string them together in a sentence, you're going to have infinite amount of possibilities. It's like almost like the butterfly effect. When working with schools and creating larger summits, Heidi and I have spent weeks on one question. And to see, because when we first started doing this, we would ask a question and not put as much thought into it. And we're like, oh, we weren't prepared for that particular outcome. And then we would look back at the question, and it was just the shift of a preposition, with versus and, something like that. Right? It's really amazing to see it come alive.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, there's working with just the way you're asking those questions to staff. I think a lot of schools or admin that might be doing some PD to try to show that they care about their staff. They use that like find your why, but I think that's something, like you said, a lot of teachers they know that that's not something we need to spend PD time on. It's really talking about how they can feel appreciated, right? Or talking about what makes them tick as an educator rather than why are they in education, right? So I think people can definitely reach out to you and Heidi and find out more about the PD. So we've had a great conversation around appreciative inquiry mostly, but also your work in education, from being an English teacher to finding out more about appreciative inquiry, working on using those skills in your classroom, and then consulting. Out of everything we've talked about, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I would say, because we didn't really, I mean, we could have talked for hours on all of this, right? To make the point that it's not just toxic positivity, it's not rainbows and unicorns, rose-colored glasses. What it is realizing that we do have the capacity for joy, abundance, to flourish. And there are obstacles that might happen along the way. So it's not denying that. It's saying, where have we been successful in the past? Where have we been resilient? And how might we apply that so that we can overcome the obstacles? We can thrive and have success despite them, or maybe even because of them. And again, it's really looking to the outcome that you want. It's really easy to admire problems. And then when we find more problems, we get a hit of dopamine because we're wired for that. Same thing can happen when you're looking at gratitude, when you're looking, and there's tons of science to prove that. So it's really about being mindful. What you appreciate will appreciate.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing to end on. What you appreciate, we appreciate. So, where can people connect with you and find you online?
So there is an opportunity for people to reach out to Jennifer at a trailofconversations.com. But honestly, that goes to a different email where if you really want to get to me quickly, you can, my email is right there, Jennifer at jenformation.com. I'm really horrible with social media. I really should be doing more with all those platforms, but you can just look me up on Facebook and instant message me. Really, I'm very approachable. I would love to have my phone blow up and have everyone reach out to me saying, how can we learn more? And I'm actually creating a cohort with Heidi. There's a Trail of Conversations. Probably if you Google that, or not Google that, if you search that on Facebook, we have a Facebook group. It is a private group to
Okay.
make sure that people are educators. And if people request to join the Trail of Conversations Facebook group, will approve you. And then we can really start the conversation going. That's my New Year's resolution, was to engage more, because we created that group a while ago. And quite honestly, we kind of forgot about it because we were so busy creating content for our schools. But we want to grow that because that's a place where people can learn. It's free, and start the conversations going, because really it's a trail of conversations.
That's great. I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being my guest on the Out of the Trenches podcast today. It was a pleasure learning more about your work and how you can help other educators.
Thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and it's been lovely. Thank you so much.